Welcome to Day 8 of the Cardiovascular DocuClass. I'm your host, Jonathan Landsman. Today we're featuring 4 great speakers. Dr. Robert DiMaria will share one of the most important messages in this DocuClass about cholesterol. And Dr. Thomas Lewis will reveal a shocking truth about statins and how the pharmaceutical industry uses statistics and marketing to fool the public. Dr. David Jockers will offer the best strategies for fixing damaged heart cells, and Dr. Rashid Buttar will detail several smart ways to fix heart problems. First up, I'd like you to meet Dr. Robert DiMaria, and I can tell you without a shadow of a doubt, if you're taking cholesterol-lowering medication, you won't want to miss this presentation, which is probably one of the most important ones in this entire event. So, Dr. Bob, cholesterol for most people, if it's too high, they only hear, got to take medicine. That's the only way to bring it down, but obviously there's a lot more to cholesterol than most people are hearing. So talk to us about it, please.
Well, you know, cholesterol is almost like an open-end question, an open-end comment. Cholesterol is the main building block of all steroids in your body. I want you to think of steroids as the building blocks for male and female hormones, for sugar hormones, also for mineral hormones. But for the purpose of the conversation I'll have with you today, cholesterol has everything to do with making something called cortisol, cortisone. You've heard of cortisol, you've heard of cortisone, and many of you have had cortisone shots, and you've had different outside-in forms of cortisone applied to your body. Here's what's going on. I like to call it the steroid tree or the cholesterol cascade. Pretty fancy little name there, isn't it? So cholesterol becomes something called pregnenolone. Pregnenolone becomes progesterone. What I'm doing is I have the whole tree right in front of my eyes in case you're wondering what I'm doing. So cholesterol becomes pregnenolone. Pregnenolone becomes progesterone. Progesterone becomes cortisone. Cortisol, very important. It's like what water is for a fireman. So we have the body. So let's talk about the fire and inflammation. So what I have learned over time, cholesterol is really important, but when your cholesterol is elevated, sometimes it could be due to stress as well as diet. So I want to tell you this little scenario, this little story right now. So in the body, we are using cortisol as the water a fireman uses. So let's just say you're consuming sugar. Now, do you remember many years ago that they used, the medical model, the scientific community, the food manufacturers, used something called trans fat or partially hydrogenated oils, which, by the way, Jonathan, was developed in the 1800s. There was a French individual that was trying to make candles from a different source versus beeswax. So they came up with this whatever kind of concoction that really was trans fat, but it became margarine, oleomargarine. So back in World War II, so when they developed this margarine or this trans fat, they pretty much put it away because I don't think the dairy farmers were too excited about it because it was going to be replacing butter. But during World War II, somebody kind of figured out that this concoction was somewhere in the world, and they wanted the soldiers to have real butter. So the people at home were given this little plastic envelope that was white with a little red button on it. And how do you know that? Well, because when I was a kid and we used to go camping, we used to get this little plastic with a red button that had yellow dye in it. So this trans fat or margarine was really white. Lord knows what really was in it. And you push this little red button and you made the white become yellow. And so then over time, as this developed, this trans fat, and the term trans fat is because in the human body, the way the molecules are set up, when they heated the vegetable oil, when they made the trans fat, so trans fat was a vegetable oil, they added some different elements to it, they heated it to really high, the molecule hence twisted, trans fat twisted molecule. In the human body, normal fat is C-shaped. We call it cis fat. Well, cis fats make cell membranes. Around your body, it's made up of oil. So let's just say that you are a partaker of foods that have trans fat in it or partially hydrogenated oils. It confuses your body, and it confuses to such a point that it can create inflammation in the body. So we have this whole fat metabolism pathway. So when you eat food, food has to go through steps to become anti-inflammatory. We call it a prostaglandin. So you can say, well, Dr. Bob, what does all this have to do with cholesterol and cortisol and inflammation in the body? Well, when you have inflammation in your body, it can be caused by trans fat. Because see, we've been led to believe that all of the inflammation in our body is from steak, dairy, cheese. And I am not telling you that you need to go out and stop or start eating that. I'm trying to explain to you that that's not the only reason you can have inflammation in your body. So if you're consuming partially hydrogenated oils or trans fat, and I'm going to add a couple other things to it, a food additive, and or if you're eating sugar, those foods stop your body from making some anti-inflammatory fat hormones. So let's take it back to now we have inflammation in your body. So we have fire. So what happens is in the human body, we have the cortisol that has to help put the fire out. So we have two fire trucks in the body. We have the LDL fire truck, which people call the bad cholesterol. I like to call it the oxidation or the rust cholesterol. And then you have the HDL cholesterol, which is the good or the healthy, or I like to call it the exercise cholesterol. You can see, why do you call it the exercise cholesterol for, Dr. Bob? Because exercise is one of the ways you can raise your HDL. So in the human body, let's say you're having a lot of inflammation and you're not feeling good, and you go to see your healthcare provider, they do a venipuncture, and your LDL cholesterol is elevated. And the doctor says to you, hey, we need to put you on a drug. We're going to put you on a medicine. Commonly they like to use a statin drug that has a horrendous amount of bad effects. So I want you to stop, slow down a little bit, and think, because what I'm going to share with you right now is some of the most important information that you're going to hear in this segment. Cholesterol. I want you to look at your cholesterol results on your lab test. If your cholesterol is elevated, if it's above 200, let's just say, and your triglycerides are normal. What are triglycerides, Dr. Bob? Triglycerides are fat. So if your cholesterol is elevated and your fat is normal, chances are your cholesterol is elevated because of stress. You say, how does that, Dr. Bob? Remember the steroid tree? Cholesterol becomes pregnenolone. Pregnenolone becomes progesterone. Progesterone has to be cortisone. When you're underneath stress, your body is going to use up all the cortisone. So when it happens that way, your body says, hey, brain. The brain says, what do you need? I need more cholesterol to make cortisone. So I'm going to say this to you again. If your cholesterol is up and your triglycerides are normal, chances are your cholesterol is elevated because of stress, and those drugs might not ever lower your cholesterol. On the other hand, if your cholesterol is up and your triglycerides or your fat is up, you have your hand in the cookie jar. What does that mean, Dr. Bob? Your cholesterol is up because there's so much fat in your body that your triglycerides are elevated, and your triglycerides are a part of their cholesterol going up. So there's two reasons, from my experience, elevated cholesterol. One, stress. Two, carbs, eating a lot of refined foods. Now there's other reasons that your cholesterol could be elevated, and one of them happens to be a low thyroid gland. So if your cholesterol is elevated and you have cold hands and cold feet, you may have a low thyroid. You want to have your thyroid gland addressed also. So let's just say they decide to put you on a statin drug. When they put you on a statin drug, they're taking the portion of cholesterol out of your body that's used to make sex hormones, and it's also used to make the cortisone. That's why one of the bad effects of a cholesterol medication, i.e. a statin, is pain. So if you start taking a cholesterol medication and you have pain in your body, that's because they're taking the cholesterol out of your body that takes away pain. Let's say you're taking a cholesterol medication and your desire for intimacy goes away. That's because they're taking the cholesterol out of your body that's used to make sex hormones. So we'll have people that'll come into our office, and we see it all the time. We're able to help people lower their cholesterol, but sometimes you have to back off the amount of stress that you have inside of your body. Now, I briefly touched about HDL. HDL is high-density lipid. It's the good people. You can improve that by making sure that you're exercising enough. Your LDL, it's not necessarily that it's bad, but what's happening is that your body is placing a demand on your physiology, and that you're increasing your LDL. I know that your body is in a state of inflammation. So what we do, Jonathan, with individuals like that, is that we will supplement them with an omega oil, but what we really like to do is we like to have a blood test done called the omega test or the essential fatty acid blood spot test, because we just don't throw the dice when it comes for people to take oil. And we can specifically tell you if you have enough of what we call EPA, which is the heart oil, or DHA, which is the brain oil. So when you start to piece this all together, it is a very large puzzle.
And it's amazing information already you've given. Thank you, Dr. Bob. If you can unpack a little bit this idea of, like you said, people simplistically believe, oh, the meat is raising my cholesterol, I have to cut out all meat. But the reality is there's a lot of disharmony to the way people are eating. Too many vegetable oils, animal foods if they eat them, but they're factory farmed animals, eating food that's not good for them. They're sick animals, their ratios are off, and then people are consuming those. So can you speak a little bit more detail about what's throwing them off just on a diet level alone?
Well, that's a very good point. So when we look at the omega test, in the body we have omega-3 and we have omega-6. It's based on the position of bonds. So the omega-6 and omega-3 oils are both good. The omega-6 oil, just like omega-3, takes away inflammation, causes blood cells not to stick together, causes blood vessels to be soft. Now, when you eat corn oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, soybean oil, and those mass-produced oils, what happens is when you eat them in excess, you can say, what's excess, Dr. Bob? It's basically most people, it's safflower oil and sunflower oils everywhere today. Once you start eating them, you can literally thin your blood too much. So your body put a backup mechanism that those oils are transferred to another metabolic pathway that includes something called arachidonic acid. Arachidonic acid causes inflammation in the body, but it does it for a good way because it causes pain and it causes your blood to get thickened. See, if you didn't do that, you'd bleed to death from eating too many of the omega-6 fats. This is why they encourage people to take an aspirin. See, when you take an aspirin, you're thinning your blood, but what we have our patients do is we go backwards up the system and we show them that they're eating too much safflower oil and sunflower oil. And I want to drop a little nugget to you that's not well known. When I have people that come into the office that are 75 or 80 years old, and this is very, very serious, they might have what I call aspirin-induced anemia. I'm going to say that again. Aspirin-induced anemia. So you may be a caretaker for an aged mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, aunt, uncle, and they're just not responding well. But if they're taking their aspirin every day and they're anemic and their doctors are scratching their head like, I can't figure out why, hello, what's going on is the aspirin is causing them to bleed, and you don't want that. So Jonathan, to go backwards a little bit with the red meat and the cheese, they're already arachidonic acid, and I believe back when they were doing the research, they saw arachidonic acid, they saw milk, mollusk, cheese, and red meat, so they thought they were the bad guys, but they are not necessarily the bad guys. Everybody negated this whole other area over here of safflower oil and sunflower oil. So I want you to do some homework now. I want you to become label savvy. I want you to start looking at labels, and these guys are so tricky. They'll go sunflower oil / safflower oil / and then they'll put other oil. We don't even have a clue. We literally do not have a clue, Jonathan, what's in our foods today.
Yeah, no, you're describing all of these foods that I think most people, if they do start looking at labels and the kind of food that they're eating, even peanut butter, which you would think is just roasted peanuts or just peanuts, and that's it, they're putting oil in that. The breads, the bagels, the chips, everything that they associate with maybe flour, you shouldn't have too much flour. It could be genetically modified, more toxic, but they're pouring oil into all those products. So we are eating way too much omega-6 to omega-3, right?
Well, we are, and you made a very valid point. Those oils are often created by genetically modified seeds or grains, anything that can increase the production. So I want to briefly tell you about this omega test and the essential fatty acid blood spot test, because this is very serious also. We have individuals that come into the office that have MS. That's a nervous system problem. I want you to know that your nerves need oil. They need it. I had this one individual that had MS for 14 years, and when we evaluated her omega test, she not only did not have enough oil, she was totally oil deficient. That's good oil deficient. And we had to, believe this or not, supplement her with 10 grams of oil a day. So for those of you who are mechanics, or ladies, if you have a boyfriend or a husband or uncle that works on cars, could you imagine driving a car with no oil in it? The engine's going to overheat, the engine's going to be pinging, and the engine's going to be breaking down. Think of your body as an engine. And the glory of it is today is this omega test. And I know it's kind of funny, Jonathan, because a lot of the people that are 35 years or older don't even know what a dipstick is. They used to put a dipstick in an engine, you pull it out to see how much oil you have, but everybody today leases cars and they take them to the lube place. So your engine has oil in it. You're supposed to check the oil, and you're actually supposed to change the oil because the oils are part of keeping that whole thing lubricated. So with this omega test, it's like doing a dipstick. So here's the scary part. You could have heart disease because your oils are off. You could be taking a heart medication or a cholesterol medication, and over time, your brain starts going. It's like, what do you mean, Dr. Bob? Well, there's a fat in the brain called DHA, docosahexaenoic acid. It's for your nervous system. There's a fat for the heart called EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid. So I'm going to stop for a moment. If you don't have enough heart oil, chances are you're not going to have enough brain oil, and you're going to have depression, anxiety, Alzheimer's, and other emotional challenges. You're going to be inflamed because you have too much omega-6 in your body. You're not going to feel good. You're going to go to the healthcare provider, and they're going to put you on an antidepressant that I'll guarantee you you'll never get off of. Because I have had people come in that are taking antidepressants for years. Scary, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Talk about some of the oils. You say oils. It's not like drinking oil. Where do they get good fats from? What are some of those foods so we know what they look like?
Well, I want you to know this. Olive oil is not an omega-3 fat. Olive oil is an omega-9 fat. Olive oil has a high melting point, a high burning point, about 310 degrees. My wife and I rarely ever do anything fried. We will saute with olive oil. If you see it smoking, it's too hot. I personally take a anchovy sardine capsule oil. I take 1,000 milligrams every day. I want you to know, because it's almost impossible to avoid safflower oil and sunflower oil today, because it literally is everywhere, everywhere. My wife actually makes, we used to buy hummus, Jonathan, that was made with olive oil. We used to buy items that had olive oil in it. You can hardly buy anything with olive oil in it anymore. So we make our own hummus. We make a lot of our own food. So you can saute with olive oil. We also will use some coconut oil. I don't do more than about a tablespoon of coconut oil every day. I am not saying coconut oil is bad or good. Coconut oil is a medium chain fat. Some people say it's good for brain. Some people say it's good for heart. I like it because it just makes me feel good. It makes my brain clicking a little bit better. I don't overdo it, because some people, I think, tend to overdo a lot of things, putting in their coffee, putting in everything. You may want, if you're doing that kind of work, you may want to have your omega oils checked just to make sure they're not getting impacted in a negative way. Reduce your safflower oil. There's other oils like avocado oil. I also want you to know that I take a plant oil, which is a really good oil, called black currant seed oil. It is a combination of omega-3, 6, and 9. And as a side note, I have had patients have eczema, Jonathan. Eczema will go away or improve. Got to watch how I clarify that. Eczema I've seen improve with black currant seed oil. A lot of you watching me right now have itchy skin, huge problem. We'll use black currant seed oil. We'll use calcium, and we support adrenal gland health. And as a side note, I used to get fever blisters on my lips. Fever blisters are a lack of calcium. So I take L-lysine every day, and I take calcium along with my black currant seed oil, and I'm going to give you a top secret right now. Are you ready? You're going to love this. I used to get poison ivy. And by the grace of God, I learned a long time ago that when I would have poison ivy, it was because I didn't have enough calcium in my body. I have a lot of our patients that they're poison ivy. They never get it once they supplement with calcium and L-lysine and some vitamin D.
And so more is great, Dr. Bob, and more of a bigger picture now when people are focusing in on some of the dairy food, perhaps a small amount. They shouldn't have a lot of it anyway, but if they're going to have that, raw dairy, 100% grass-fed beef, avocado, sesame seeds, Brazil nuts, if they focus on everything they're eating, make their own salad dressing, tomato sauces. If they go commercial, sounds to me and listening to you, the risk goes way up. You buy in the grocery store, the omega-6s you're consuming way up, toxicity you're consuming is way up, factory raised meat, all of this. And if they focus on quality, local organic farmer, making their own stuff at home, it's a home run.
It's definitely a home run, and I don't think a lot of people, we have somebody that we get our eggs from. It's one of our patients. The chickens are raised in the field, and he loses a lot of them to chicken hawks and raccoons because they're out in the field. But a real quote-unquote farmer egg is, the yolk is literally orange, and it does not repeat on you. And I want you to, when I say repeat, in Italian we call it agita, because when they feed chickens, whatever they feed the chickens, so they'll stay healthy and strong, whatever's in that chicken goes in the egg and it goes in you. So if you're eating eggs and you're getting indigestion, there's probably something in that egg. And if you're going to eat chicken, you want to eat primarily only ever organic chicken. And what Jonathan said about you're going to do any kind of dairy, you want organic, pasture-raised cows. Now I personally don't encourage our patients to consume a lot of yogurt and ice cream. I'm saying that with a smile because people in America love ice cream. They just love it. So I have learned is that when you eat ice cream, it aggravates that left neck and mid-back because that pancreas is being overstimulated. So this is just no extra charged information for you. I've been practicing since 1978, and I learned this in the 1980s. Mid-back pain can be caused by what you're eating. Watermelon, I'm not telling you not to eat it, so we don't need to have any emails saying, I mean I can't eat watermelon. I'm saying to you, watermelon might cause it for some of you. Pineapple, white potatoes, bananas, raisins, grapes, they are placing a demand on your pancreas. So I know there's people watching me right now. You're hitting your neighbors saying, hey, Leroy, I think he just answered your question. 95% of the people that come to my office have left neck and mid-back pain.
And just in 10, 20 seconds, another very important point for people to know as a big picture, heavy metal toxicity, any of the poor food choices in the past, all this toxicity can drive cholesterol up, right?
Well, what happens is it causes inflammation and altered function in the body. So your body is going to react because, see, there's mineral corticoids in the body and there's other types of steroids that are impacting. Just like hormones, testosterone can be impacted. You know, we're seeing so many men today that have low testosterone because of stress. So all of this is all interrelated. And your adrenal glands have mineral corticoids to excrete, help your body get rid of minerals.
Thank you, Dr. Bob. Really good stuff.
Thank you.
Next up, Dr. Thomas Lewis will amaze you with information that proves why everything you've been taught about cholesterol is completely wrong. Also, I don't want you to miss a dramatic story about how a man under the care of statin therapy and how the use of those drugs nearly ended his life. Plus, as you'll soon see, the effectiveness of statin drugs has been over-exaggerated for years, and you'll discover how the pharmaceutical industry uses those statistics that they have and marketing to fool the public. Enjoy this presentation with Dr. Thomas Lewis. Okay, so this is going to be probably one of the more important areas of discussion when it comes to heart disease, Dr. Lewis, because everybody's hearing about cholesterol. I think most people are very scared about it. Let's break this down, talk a little bit about cholesterol.
Well, I think we have to realize is that people are worried about bringing cholesterol in through food, but that's a minor source of cholesterol in your body. The liver synthesizes cholesterol. And I've yet to find something that the liver synthesizes, that the brain tells the liver to synthesize, that's deliberately harmful to our body. Here's factoid number 2. Your brain is only 2.5% the mass of your body, small part of your body. 25% of the cholesterol in your body is in your brain. So if cholesterol is so harmful, why isn't it in our brain? And then the third piece of this puzzle is that the brain, second to the eye, which is very small, brain is much larger, is the most vascular tissue in your entire body. So if cholesterol is causing heart disease, which is really a vessel disease, why is our brain with all that cholesterol up there not deteriorating from vascular pathology from the moment we're born?
And I think it's important to point out that I think a lot of this is born out of this simple, overly simplistic concept that cardiology sees plaque inside of us. Cholesterol is a part of that. Oh, cholesterol must be the problem.
Well, it was expedient, and it's like turning the Titanic. They went down a certain path with Ansel Keys, and it was hard to right that path. And Dr. McCulley, one of my mentors at Harvard, was actually besmirched and thrown out of Harvard in 1969 because he refused to accept the cholesterol theory of cardiovascular disease. he was the one who showed that elevated homocysteine is a much stronger predictor of future heart disease compared to cholesterol. And cholesterol does elevate. It's like, are there fire trucks at a fire? And the answer is yes. So just to give a more broader perspective, Jonathan, about the prevalence of cholesterol in the animal kingdom. I always try to quiz my participants to get them thinking provocatively and create an oh my God moment. So if you had to pick the food highest in cholesterol, and it's nothing compared to what your liver produces, but the food highest in cholesterol would be organ meat, and in particular, the brain of other animals. So humans are not selective towards cholesterol as a vital nutrient. It's highly important. So there's an article published by the outreach component of Harvard Medical School, the Harvard Medical Letter. They say trusted advice from Harvard Medical School. And in 2007, they published an article called Cholesterol, the Mind, and the Brain. And it said, despite its notoriety in heart disease, they didn't say despite its cause in heart disease, despite its notoriety, cholesterol is an extremely important substance. It's a building block to the steroid hormones, cortisol, the sex hormones, testosterone. So if you're low T and you're on a statin drug, you might now know why. Estrogen. It is a building block of cell membranes. And this Harvard article said very specifically that not only is cholesterol there to create structure, but it's actually there to create function in all cell membranes by allowing materials, nutrients, ions, whatever, to flow in and out of the cells. And our cells are batteries, so you need that flow. So when you inhibit the production of cholesterol or the transmission of cholesterol through your body, which we'll get into, then you're impacting the health of your cells. So it's a very insidious thing. So the interesting thing is I've used this article from Harvard to help people that were just frightened by their doctor that says, oh, you have to be on this cholesterol-lowering drug or you're going to die, to explain to them that even Harvard has a different view. About 3 months ago, I had an eerie feeling. This was published in 2007, so 13 years ago. But for some reason, divinely or whatever, I had this feeling that because statins and cholesterol treatment is so important to the medical community and Harvard's sort of the leader, that it might someday go down. So about 3 months ago, I saved a copy as a PDF file. And then I was doing a consult with a very intelligent microbiologist who was on statin drug and has all kinds of joint pain. And I said, let's just Google the brain, cholesterol, Harvard, and you'll see this article. And it wasn't there. But I saved it and sent it to him. And then I wrote to Harvard, the head, a chaired professor at Harvard Medical School, who's head of outreach, and I just asked him in impolite ways why this article was no longer relevant and why they took it down. But of course, statin drugs are the most ubiquitous drugs in history and have made $100 billion in profit. So it's hard to fight that engine. But you know, they don't really have a good track record. But the thing is, when you look at cholesterol, LabCorp says 100 to 199 is normal. Some labs say 0 to 199. But on the low end of cholesterol, much higher risk, and the number one condition that leads to early mortality when your cholesterol is low is violent deaths. You can look it up. It's right there. Violent deaths, suicides related to mood disorders. When your cholesterol is low, your brain that has 25% of the cholesterol is suffering, and your mood goes down. So in my world, 160 is getting on the edge of too low. I'll give you an example. We had a participant in our program who had a family history of cardiovascular disease. So he was on a cholesterol-lowering drug. And my wife, who does all the forensic work for our team, got his records going back 10 years and showed cholesterol below 160, cholesterol 140, cholesterol 150, 130. And so 8 years into cholesterol therapy, statin therapy, he has a massive heart attack and he almost dies. Now, we got his record right after the heart attack, and his white blood cell count, which not important, I guess, but it's much more important in predicting heart disease, was 14,900, a very high number. So what we did in this case is we titrated back to find out, why did he have the heart attack? He's on the preventative, protective medication. And so here, let me just do it briefly. Low cholesterol for a long period of time. Publications at the University of San Francisco, University of California, San Francisco, and Kaiser Permanente, major studies show that when your cholesterol is lowered too far or it's too low, you're much more prone to infection. So now let's look at this gentleman, plant manager, not a bum, a well-to-do guy, intelligent guy, has a massive heart attack at the age of 57. He joined our program 6 months later. So it turned out that 3 weeks prior to the massive heart attack, he had his entire uppers removed for dentures. And that created, it's like hitting a hornet's nest. Let all the hornets fly. And so it's well published that even up to a year after a major dental procedure, but particularly in the first 30 days, high risk of a vascular event. High risk of a vascular event. So why does a 57-year-old plant manager lose all his uppers? Because his cholesterol had been lowered so long that he became vulnerable to infection, periodontal infection, as per Kaiser Permanente, not some fringe group, one of the largest healthcare systems in the nation. So ultimately, you know what caused his heart attack? Statin drug. The medication designed to prevent his heart attack caused his heart attack.
I just want to crystallize this for people because I've heard this concept over the years on and off by very few people, but I think it's really important what you're bringing up. The idea that you're physically driving down cholesterol because of a drug is a very dangerous thing on a practical level for a lot of people who have a lot of these infections. Without the cholesterol-lowering medication, a lot of times I've heard that cholesterol, and I'd like you to speak to it, is very protective and can actually be elevated. Like too high a cholesterol might be a sign that someone has infections or toxins or something is going on here that people should be much more aware of than just thinking, drive your high cholesterol number down into the basement because of a drug, not address all the toxins or the infections. And that's where real injury can happen in the body, right?
Well, let's look at what cholesterol does according to that Harvard Health article. And I'll give that to you if you want to make it available to your people. But it is a membrane builder, and cells are constantly breaking down and then being rebuilt. So red blood cells last about 4 months, and we completely replace them every 4 months. So cholesterol is part of that process. So if your cholesterol is high, it's very clear that you need it to rebuild cell membranes or new cells. So you obviously have something causing them to deteriorate. But I think it's important for a nomenclature perspective. The drug lowers LDL. LDL is not cholesterol. LDL is a lipoprotein. What is a lipoprotein in the body? What's the analogy to the real world? It's soap. That's what an LDL is. It's a soap. Why do you need soap in your body? Well, because we have fats, like oil in your salad dressing, and we have water. Your bloodstream is water. So how do we carry fats through a water-based bloodstream? So very simple. If you have a greasy dish and you wash it with just water, does the grease come off? But you put detergent on, and now it comes right off. And all you've done is you've encapsulated the grease into something that is soluble in water. the exact same thing's happening in your body. LDL is being produced in the liver along with cholesterol, and the LDL simply carries the cholesterol through your bloodstream to tissues that need it. But the thing is, it's not just carrying cholesterol. It's carrying vitamin A, fat soluble, EPA, good for the brain, DHA, other important fats, vitamin E, fat soluble, vitamin D, fat soluble, vitamin K, fat soluble. So any number, it's basically LDL is a taxi cab. And the industry has made LDL bad cholesterol. It's an absurd thing. First of all, it's not cholesterol. Second of all, it's not bad. It is a transport mechanism for things that are essential to our body. Now, cholesterol is not an essential nutrient, and I probably shouldn't have said that because our body synthesizes. An essential nutrient is things we have to get from the outside, like vitamin A from food. We're not synthesizing vitamin A, but we are synthesizing cholesterol. So what is HDL? HDL is simply the cousin to LDL. It's not good or bad. It transports excess fats or oxidized fats back to the liver for recycling, reprocessing, or disposal. So LDL carries to, HDL carries back. So what is HDL really telling us, the good cholesterol? It's really telling us that if it's depressed, you have insufficient healthy fats and healthy vitamins because you don't need the HDL to carry them back because there's not an excess. There's not a surplus circulating in your system. And when LDL is up, it's simply saying that your body has a need for these essential and synthesized, controlled by the brain, things like cholesterol, like vitamin A, like vitamin D. Vitamin D is not getting around your body without LDL. Oil and water doesn't mix.
And again, all that Western medicine is teaching people is be alarmed over a number, and never once did they talk about lifestyle changes that could certainly, easily, quickly change these numbers if they really had to. They don't know. Most people don't know.
Yeah, well, a good number for cholesterol based on international studies, and that's total cholesterol. Once again, it's a misnomer. We're never talking about free cholesterol, so we're talking about HDL plus LDL plus free cholesterol to get a total cholesterol number. But it's around 220, give or take, based on how high your LDL or HDL, importantly, is. And do you need an HDL of 100? Probably not. 50, 60, that means you have sufficient healthy fats circulating. You have enough recirculation, if you will. But, so that's the right range. And what I've shown in our work, looking at things like fibrinogen, which is a signaling molecule for repair and recovery, is that fibrinogen tends to go up. Clearly, when you have need for more repair and recovery, because fibrinogen will go up when you cut yourself, and you obviously have to heal. Fibrinogen signals that process to bring all the appropriate repair molecules to the problem. But if your vessels are inflamed, fibrinogen will go up. And we see a very clear correlation between elevated fibrinogen and elevated total cholesterol. That means elevated LDL and elevated cholesterol being carried by the LDL to, guess what? Repair. Fibrinogen is probably telling the liver to produce more LDL. And it's all regulated by the brain. And once again, I can't reiterate enough, 25% of the cholesterol is in your brain, and that means it's 10 times more concentrated here than any place else. Yet, my brain still seems to be functioning despite all that cholesterol up there.
Right. So let's talk about what most people are being exposed to now because of all this manic craziness about cholesterol, and that's the statin drugs. Talk a little bit about what you've seen in your research, the real data when it comes to taking statin drugs.
Right. So, I wrote in my book on Alzheimer's that, the statins play, the cholesterol plays a very important role in brain health. But I also did a lot of research on the drugs that lower cholesterol before statins and the ones that lower cholesterol after statins. and you don't hear about them. Why, if this new PCSK, I think, inhibitors are so fantastic at lowering LDL, why aren't they the rage? And why are statins still prescribed? Because these new drugs only lower LDL, which is a very bad thing. A statin does three things. Number one, it lowers the production of LDL in your liver. Number two, it lowers the production of CoQ10, which is a very important coenzyme in metabolic function and muscle function, so that's why you have a lot of pain and congestive heart failure coming downstream from statin use. But the real reason why statins provide any benefit at all is they're actually antibiotics. They come from macrolides. So there was, creating a drug is a business decision. Obviously there's great science going on in the pharmaceutical industry and all that, and some of the things they discover are amazing. But what actually comes to the market is always a business decision.
That's incredible what you just said at the end, though, about how it's an antibiotic as well. So many people are running around with bacterial infections.
Right.
So, okay, maybe it has some benefit, but
Right.
wouldn't it be so much better to take away the toxicity of a statin drug
Right.
and take care of the infection naturally?
Right. So they may have to make a decision. How do we market this thing? And marketing is a cholesterol lowering without telling you that it's antibiotic, because no one's going to take an antibiotic for life. And most people that are on statin drugs are on them for life. So what I did is, in this book here, Jonathan, Quarterback Your Own Health, I have all the data on the surprising antimicrobial aspects of statin drugs, the surprising anti-infective activity, and there's lots and lots of publications showing this, but I had a more direct path to the pharmaceutical industry. So a gentleman, a medicinal scientist and friend of mine, Steve Schmidt, when I was up in Cambridge, Mass, was on the Warner Lambert team that developed Lipitor. And then Pfizer bought Warner Lambert, and Lipitor became the most profitable drug in history. And my mentor at Harvard, Dr. Tremp, informed me that statins were antibiotic because he studied the molecule, and he said, these are macrolides, and like Biaxin or zithromycin, these are all antibiotics, so it's in that family. And so one day I just went to Dr. Schmidt, I said, Steve, statins are antibiotics, what's your comment? He goes, we know that. So the pharmaceutical industry knows, and that's stupid, they know why they provide a little bit of benefit, but there's something very confusing in medicine, and there's a little cliche, there are lies, damn lies, then there are statistics. And the statistics on statins are very weak because they give you relativistic statistics on how they work. So for example, let's say we have two people and one benefits. That's 50%. Now let's say we have 10 people and two were sick and one benefited. So they report it as 50%, but it's really only 10%. So I myself and Dr. Tremp at Harvard, we studied the Zocor trial, which is a major statin clinical trial with published data, 51,000 patient years of study. And they present the relative statistics from those that received benefit, those that didn't, and they came up with a number of like 22% benefit. But they were using it like out of 10, we went from 2 to 1. Okay? The real efficacy in terms of preventing cardiovascular disease with a statin drug is 0.3%. That's the absolute value. That's the so-called numbers to treat. That's the real important number in terms of will it work for you or not, 0.3%. But the problem with it is there's so many downsides to these drugs that, like you mentioned, Jonathan, let's find a better way to treat the infection or the inflammation. Just doing something which I'm such a zealot about, cod liver oil. And I know some people will besmirch cod liver oil, but cod liver oil has written documentation of clinical benefit going back to the Viking era, 1,000 years. So there's no supplement on the market that has a longer history of improving human health than cod liver oil. And what does it do? It brings cholesterol to our body. But it brings vitamin D. It brings all the fat-soluble things. But if you're on a statin drug, you have now suppressed the efficacy of these healthy foods because you're stuck in this vortex of depending on glucose. You can't, when you lose weight, this is published in Livestrong and Mayo Clinic, guess what physiological marker goes up to indicate you're losing weight? And Jonathan, it's a rigged question, so I'll just answer it. LDL. Why would LDL go up when you lose weight? Because you're going from stored fatty acids to triglycerides. And the triglycerides are transported to be burnt through LDL. So when you start losing weight, you go into a little more ketosis, burning fats. The only way you lose weight is to burn fat. And the only way to burn the fat is to get the fat to the tissue that'll burn the fat. And LDL is the transport vehicle to do same. So if you're suppressing LDL, guess what? You won't lose weight.
Right, but it's common sense what you're talking about. All the toxicity of all these medications, the toxins are causing the body difficulty in functioning well. So many of these drugs suppress bodily functions. It just makes perfect sense that it's harder and harder for people to live a healthier life if they're loaded down with these drugs.
Yeah, there's no question about it. There's no free lunch, and unfortunately we live in a world of instantaneous gratification. But the statin drugs and the cholesterol lowering is the only thing that the medical community, the traditional medical community, is doing to manage chronic disease, and they're literally failing. The Wall Street Journal about 4 months ago came out with an article, and it was titled "Heart Disease Death Rates in America are Going Up, Even in Healthy Places." And they looked at 3 cities in Colorado, but overall they showed that like Louisville, Kentucky, and a couple cities in Colorado, where the death rate from cardiovascular disease from 2011 to 2016 went up by over 20%. And these are in people where 48% of the people in the study were medicated with statins. And since from 2011 to 2016, the overall death rate on a per capita 100,000 person basis in America, despite the blood pressure medications and the cholesterol lowering medications, has gone up by 4.3%. So how can anybody think that this is solving a cure or any even kind of solution? The CEO and chairman of Kaiser Permanente dies in his sleep from a heart attack. John Warner, the president of the American Heart Association, 3 years ago at a Heart Association convention, has a massive heart attack. And of course, the fake news shows, President Warner, resting comfortably, had a minor heart attack. But then they interviewed the EMT that serviced Dr. Warner, that saved his life, and said his heart stopped for like 6 minutes. So I guess we have a new definition of a minor heart attack. If your heart stops for 6 minutes, it's now minor, according to the American Heart Association. But you can be sure these people were on statin drugs. Obviously. That's the only thing they know to do for chronic disease.
Okay, so let's get into a little bit in the last few minutes as we're closing out here, Dr. Lewis. Some of the things we can do if someone does have, and talk a little bit about what you consider a very high level of cholesterol, but more importantly, what can people do to kind of bring it down to a more safer level, which you said is around 220 or so?
I hate to say it's the usual suspects. It's the usual suspects of healthy fats, marine products, which are very anti-inflammatory, high nutrient density foods. So, my plate, not the my plate, is about 75% vegetables and healthy fats. My favorite plate is smoked salmon and a Greek salad. You have fermented, you have a rainbow of vegetables, and you have a little bit of healthy protein and fat to support your brain. You've got to support your brain. If you're not supporting your brain with nutrition, you've got a big problem. But people who have chronic, I'm not talking about genetic familial hypercholesteremia. I'm talking about someone with a cholesterol 280, 320, 340 chronically. And that used to be the old standard before they wanted to really suppress it with the drugs. is they probably, and this is well published by the University of San Francisco, probably have an inflammatory or infectious process. So stop looking at the cholesterol and look at what's really underlying it. It's the white blood cell counts. It's the C-reactive protein. It's the fibrinogen. It's the sedimentation rate. And then let's run a very detailed risk survey on you to see what myriad of things that can be contributing to the elevation of your immune response and susceptibility to infection.
Again, right, just to make it really clear and simple as we close out here, Dr. Lewis, the idea that the toxic fats, you said healthy fats, toxic fats that have so much crap in it that we don't want to eat and put into our body,
Sure.
all the chemicals in the fruits and the vegetables of non-organic food, all of these things, the infections that we don't deal with in our body, this is what's causing the body to say, red alert, create more cholesterol, patch up areas, especially when it comes to the
Exactly.
cardiovascular system. Let's try to put some plaster in there. Let's try to keep things together so that we literally don't explode. I know I'm being dramatic, but is this pretty close to a picture that people should be thinking of more?
This is it, and we really got to think in the mentality of a chronic disease as being on a continuum. You know, when you get the flu, it's a sudden surge. But chronic disease slowly matriculates, and if your cholesterol is slowly going up, that means you have some underlying pathology going on that your body is trying to correct and repair, and cholesterol is an extraordinarily part of that repair process. So we have to look at it for what it really is, and our brain doesn't fool us or doesn't trick us. It's producing cholesterol for a very important reason.
Thank you so much, Dr. Lewis. I know this is going to help a lot of people out.
Appreciate your time.
I hope you're enjoying the final day, day 8 of the cardiovascular docu-class. Don't forget to watch the other video you see on this page featuring Dr. David Jockers and Dr. Rashid Buttar about how to fix a damaged heart. And by the way, if you would like a copy of all the presentations inside the cardiovascular docu-class, plus all the other bonuses, simply click the link you see on this page and choose the package that best fits your needs. Talk to you soon. Take care.